Hey everyone, I'm Hilary Walton, and welcome along to the Digital Culture Ideas YouTube show and podcast. This show is about how the internet and technology is changing the way we think, interact, behave, and communicate. If you're enjoying the show, I would be so grateful if you could subscribe. I know there's a lot of people out there who are listening, but they haven't subscribed. It would be the world to me if you do. Today's show has a cyber insurance theme, and I speak with Ben Brown from Ronin Pentesting all the way over in the UK, who helps small to medium-sized businesses ensure their systems are secure. So one of the most common misconceptions about cybersecurity is that it's a large business problem. Well, wrong. Over 40% of small businesses reported hacks in 2021 alone. And the truth is, small businesses are extremely vulnerable to cyber attacks because they don't think they are, or they think they can't afford proactive cybersecurity. So, in this episode, Ben and I talk about cyber insurance in particular, which is a topic many business owners, execs, and boards are navigating. Ben explains what cyber insurance is, why it's not a solution in itself, and we go into what people need to know when they're thinking about getting cyber insurance and how to make it more likely for cyber insurers to pay out when the worst happens. So Ben's advice is practical, it's bite-sized, and he's a really lovely human, which I think helps when you're a business owner trying to understand and manage cyber risk. Ben, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks very much for having me on. We managed to get around the time difference, so well done us.
We did. New Zealand to the UK. Not an easy one, but we're here. Great. Well, let's jump straight into it. So I'm really keen for you to tell us a bit about you and how you got in cyber, just to really set the scene for the audience.
Okay, so I guess my first entry into cybersecurity was as a graduate on a graduate training scheme for NCC Group, who are a large corporate consultancy, and I spent a good few years there getting trained from the ground up, and then ultimately testing my way around Europe, hacking people's websites and their networks. And then ultimately, I moved on and went solo after a while and did some freelance work. And then went into business with an ex-colleague of mine called Michael, and he's my co-founder in Ronin Pentest, where we now do vulnerability scanning for small and medium-sized businesses.
Fantastic. And can I just ask, why did you choose that niche of small to medium-sized businesses?
I saw a gap in the market because all the companies we used to provide our services to as pen testers were for high street banks and large corporations with bottomless pockets, and I started to think that we might be able to provide value for small and medium-sized businesses who need the help more, if anything, because they're less defended and don't have their own large IT departments and don't have the budgets for cutting edge cybersecurity tools. And so I thought if I could create a tool that gave access to the best in the business in terms of scanning quality, but on a much lower budget and for a lower commitment, then that would hopefully save a lot of small and medium-sized businesses a lot of pain down the line.
That's really awesome. Because I think that cyber insurance is definitely a question that I get asked a lot about, and particularly by small to medium businesses as well. So can you tell us, just to set the context again, so what is cybersecurity insurance, and is it a solution in itself?
Okay, well, as it sounds in the first instance, it is an insurance policy where you pay them, they assess how much risk they think you represent to them, and then they agree to pay out a certain amount if and when the worst happens and you do get hacked. I think as with all these things, the devil is in the detail, and it's important not to get not to imagine that they will cover absolutely every cost associated with a security breach, and also not to imagine that they're not a commercial business who won't try and get out of paying if they feel like what you've told them in the first instance is not what they're seeing when they come to observe the breach and do a forensic investigation. Then they may well try and pull the rug out, and that's the worst possible time for any business owner to discover that they've made a misjudgment, which unfortunately happens all too often these days.
Yeah, and so how can businesses try and avoid that kind of situation
I
where
think
the insurance company doesn't pay or they haven't done the right things?
Sure. Well, the first instance is when you go to agree the insurance with them, they will offer you a premium price in response to a questionnaire that you fill in. And what happens very frequently is that people answer the questionnaire in the warm light of day when they're not under threat, and they go down the list and say, "Do we do this? Yes. Do we do that? Yes. Do we do the other thing? Yes. Of course we do that. Naturally, we do all these things, and none of them are a problem." And then later on down the line, when the worst has happened and everyone's running around with their hair on fire and the situation has come to a crunch, they then discover that do they really have two-factor authentication enabled on all their accounts? Maybe some of them, most of them, one hopes. Do they always apply security patches to software within 4 weeks of release? One hopes that that's the case, but quite often reality gets in the way. And so the important thing really is to make sure that you are actually, in the first instance, not making promises that you can't keep, and then having made those promises and entered into the agreement, make sure that you are maintaining those promises. So I think penetration testing and vulnerability scanning are an important part of the suite of tools that are available to help protect oneself. And it's often both useful and healthy to have a third party's perspective, because working within an organization, it's often difficult to see the wood for the trees, if you know what I mean. So a third party coming in and saying, well, have you considered this, and could this possibly happen, is often a healthy process. And,
Absolutely. So that's when they come in and they're trying to look for the gaps. So trying to assess the performance of a security program and kind of make recommendations. That's what you mean, isn't it? By having a third party kind of coming in. Yep. And so what kind of trends are you seeing in terms of cybersecurity policies, insurance policies? Are there any in particular that you're noticing that people need to know about and pay attention to if they're thinking about getting cyber insurance?
I think the thing to be aware of really is that the insurance providers are very much tightening up at the moment. There was an initial sort of offering into the market of cybersecurity insurance when it was a new thing, and lots of people took it up. And now the sort of the washing has had time to come through, and now I think the providers are getting more claims than they would initially have expected to have. And the knock-on effect of that is that they are locking down their policies, making their questionnaires more stringent, and that makes getting a policy either more difficult or more costly, depending on what the trade-off is between risk and premium, essentially.
Yeah, I have noticed that. I think one insurance company's form I was looking at recently was about 11 pages long.
Yeah, just imagine,
and it was asking all sorts of questions, basically trying to figure out what the information security management system of the organization was like. And I was thinking, for small to medium businesses, wow, that's quite a tricky one, because they may not have everything and hence might be seeking cyber insurance, but actually it's kind of a chicken and an egg kind of factor here as well. So when people are trying to think about what they should have in place, maybe proactively, to be able to fill the form in to get the cyber insurance, you've mentioned a couple of things. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on them? So patching and vulnerability management, what sorts of proactive things should businesses be doing?
Well, I guess the starting point for all security programs is policies and documentation. So one needs to have, firstly, an asset register which lists out all of the computers within a network, what software is running on those computers, and what they're supposed to be able to communicate with, whether it's just within the network or outside onto the internet as well. So having an up-to-date asset register is the first thing. Then documenting policies is another thing, and then challenging those policies and actually reviewing them and running through exercises in the same way that you would with a fire drill in an office building. You don't wait until there's actually a fire to work out whether your fire fire exits are all in the right place, etc. You actually go through dry runs and you test and confirm, and where you find things to be lacking, you update the policy and review it, and through an ongoing process, you come out at a better result. And I think that's the case with all cybersecurity programs. They need to be an ongoing effort rather than just an overnight. Okay, we'll fill out the forms, we'll chuck the policies in the back of a cupboard and wait until it's time to review them next year. That's not being proactive. But if you're actively reviewing and challenging and testing to make sure that the expectations and assumptions that you've put into your policies are actually accurate on an ongoing basis, then you put yourself in a strong position. I guess it's like going to the gym. You don't see results overnight, but if you persevere with it, then small steps every day will culminate into big results.
You're right. And to continue that analogy, I guess sometimes when you're at the gym, you're working on your speed. Sometimes you go to the gym, you're working on your strength. So it's probably testing those different facets in an organization around security, isn't it? It doesn't all have to be like one humongous test all at once. You can kind of bite it off into smaller
Absolutely.
chunks to make it more reasonable.
Yeah, compartmentalization is definitely a thing. So you can for instance, you might have your annual pen test, which is the sort of the big test at the end of the year, but then you might change your network or your website much more frequently. So you could, rather than paying for a pen test every time you make a change, which would become unviable financially pretty quickly, you can support your network changes with periodic vulnerability scans, which is a much more cost-effective way of identifying low-hanging fruit. And still demonstrating to your insurer, should they ever come knocking on the door to ask, that you are actually being proactive. So you've got your policy documents, you've got the minutes from meetings, you've got the results from vulnerability scans and pen tests, which all culminate in evidence that you can use to demonstrate that you are being proactive in maintaining your responsibilities and protecting your data and your network. So it's an ongoing effort, but made up of lots of different contributory factors.
Yeah, and so breaking that down again, because I can definitely imagine for larger businesses, they might have these larger programs of controls, assurance, and checking in place. How does a small to medium business kind of right size that? I know you've said a bit about that already, but can you just kind of talk through that again? Like how do we make this really digestible or possible for small to medium businesses? Is there any secrets you've got there?
Your concern. I suppose the practical thing to do is break each challenge down into manageable pieces, and then once you've broken it down, approach the most approachable one first, and start chewing away and make it a regular part of your daily or weekly process. So if you're a small business and perhaps you're starting off from ground zero with no policies, then maybe you would want to add one policy to your document per month or per week, even if you're particularly proactive, so that over the course of time you build up a folder of documents which you can then come back and rely on and reference. Or an alternative is to get outside assistance. So come to speak to someone like me, or like a data protection officer. So there's lots of crossover between cybersecurity and data protection. So you might have GDPR policies in place already, which you can sort of recycle into a cybersecurity program. So there is potential for getting two birds with one stone. Similarly, if you're part of a compliance regime, so ISO 27001, as an example, there's a lot of crossover between that and cybersecurity. So it's looking for the easy wins where you can do the work once and recycle it to get multiple results, and potentially outsourcing some of the pain to someone else, so you can not have to focus on all of it yourself.
That's a good idea. And in terms of small to medium businesses, I'm imagining that quite a few of them are sort of outsourcing some of their IT, into managed services. And so when you're helping those small to medium businesses, you're probably dealing in with managed services as well.
Frequently,
I'm wondering if you've got any tips for business owners who have their IT, outsourced when they're looking at trying to get these security assessments done. I mean, is there much of that the IT managed service is doing? Is it different to the
I think
services you might provide?
I think every provider is different. So it's a little bit difficult to come up with an answer to that sort of works across the board. But what I would say is when you're going through the questionnaire that establishes your cyber insurance policy, definitely don't wing it and assume answers. And get in touch with the managed service provider and bring them into the process so that they can give you realistic responses on things that they are and are not doing, and make it a collaborative process rather than going, oh well, it says in their SLAs that they do X, Y, and Z, so I'll just go, okay, yep, that's no problem, box tick, moving on. I would question them on it, and maintain the email thread so that you've got their responses in writing should that ever come back to haunt you.
Yeah, excellent. And are there any other suggestions you've got for businesses who want to be in that really proactive space, or have you covered most of those? Looking for those really practical but not gold-plated kind of advice.
I think the main thing is document, test, and challenge. So whatever question you come up against, document what you think ought to be the case. Test your assumptions to make sure that what you've put in the document is actually accurate and realistically reflects reality, and then come back and challenge and review that on a periodic basis to find out whether it's changed.
I guess in some ways that's the only way to get into that continuous improvement cycle, isn't it? It's like that plan, do, check
Definitely so,
cycle,
yeah.
which is exactly it.
If I had a slam dunk gold-plated answer, I would give it to you, but I fear it's not as simple as that.
Yeah, it's not, and I guess that's where the industry we're in, cybersecurity, it is a bit of an arms race. So if businesses aren't checking and verifying what's happening, they can't improve to keep up with cyber criminals, because
Absolutely, yeah.
cyber criminals are definitely racing ahead, and businesses of all sizes need to keep up.
Absolutely. Well, they're well resourced. They're well intelligent. They have all everything they need to keep on pushing forwards. And an attacker only needs to be right once, whereas a defender needs to be right all the time, unfortunately.
That's right.
What's true today may not still be true tomorrow, and that's hence the ongoing review, the review part of that process.
Excellent. Oh, thank you so much, Ben. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. But before we kind of let you go, are there any final messages, or where can people find out more about you and Ronin Pentest? What kind of calls to action, for example, would you like to leave with that audience?
Sure. Okay. Well, I guess we've got we're quite active on LinkedIn and Facebook. So those are the social media channels to pick us up on and follow along on the Ronin Pentest pages. Then we've got the website, which is roninpentest.com, where there's loads and loads of blog articles with useful advice to help you along in your cybersecurity process, regardless of how far along you already are. We've got a ultimate guide to cybersecurity, which is an 18-page guide that you can download free off the site. So lots of opportunities to get involved, and if those don't work for you, then there's always my Calendly link to just book a call and have a chat.
Excellent. And I'll make sure I put all those links in the show notes for people as well. That ultimate guide sounds like something I'm definitely going to be checking out. So thank you so much, Ben. Thanks for coming on the show.